finalize. Here we are. So, welcome again, everyone. My name is Horatio, and welcome to today's conversation within the Cultural Conversation series, looking at episode 2 of Black is the New Black, an exciting TV show put forward by BBC Two, looking at the experience of Black people across the UK, thinking about how it is that we build the narrative of what we have achieved and celebrate that in the context of this conversation. So, having this conversation with me today will be Nadine Dyer as well as Precious Ighalo, and I'm very excited to hand over to Precious initially to say a little bit about yourself.
Hi, well, I'm Precious, and I am an assistant psychologist that works with NHS at the moment. I'm also an exec at YWC, which is great. Love doing that. Been doing that for a few years, and that's been really fun, especially to see things like this that we're doing now, and how we're rolling with everything that's happening in the world. So being able to have sort of like conferences like this is great. I think this, I really love this sort of conversations because I love having conversations about the intricacies of what it means to be Black, especially when you look at how it changed, how that meaning changes over, time and region and history. So having a part 2 of this conversation is going to be really interesting. And I think having Nadine here as well to input her words of wisdom into this conversation is going to be fun as well. So I hope everyone enjoys. I hope we can get some really good discourse and conversation. I'm probably expecting some gems to be dropped, and maybe some controversial points may come up. Who knows? We don't know, but I know it's going to be enjoyable. And I look forward to having further discussions with both of you.
Thank you, Precious, and over to Nadine.
Well, thank you, Horatio, and thank you, Precious. I'm very excited to be joining the conversation today, having joined previous ones in the past. So I'm Nadine Dyer. I am a Respect and Inclusion Manager at Deloitte, and I'm also the chair of our Multicultural Network as well. So, as I said, really excited to be part of the conversation this evening.
And myself, the person who doesn't stop talking, Horatio Georgestone, founder of YDWC, and the person who is going to pause so that we can dive straight into today's conversation and look at part 1 of the video series, which will be appearing on your screen any moment now.
When I heard the name Black is the New Black, it really made me smile.
I think we're on the edge of a revolution. We have our own thing, and it's really rich.
We're the influencers, the tastemakers.
Remember when we invented jazz and you didn't know what it was? Well, now we're going to do something else.
I've never really seen myself as an immigrant. I see myself as a person.
I'm proud to be Black. I've never cared to be any other way.
Everybody wants to be us, but they only want the good parts of being us. They want our physicality, they want our musicality.
Selling our culture, it's like one big hustle.
They want our talent, they want our dancing skills, they want our singing skills.
Music hasn't got no colour.
The oppressed always find a way to celebrate, right?
It's a great feeling.
We are people of talent, people of vision, people of passion.
There's a great seam of British success. When it stands out, it is dazzling. And we should celebrate it. We should celebrate it.
was going to school on my own at 7 years old. These days, you'd be like arrested for neglect or abuse or something like that. When I'm in, put the chain on the door, don't answer the door for no one until she comes home, watch TV.
I had a happy childhood. It was Mum and I, we did our thing. I'd travel with her on the bus to the nursery, she'd go off to work, and then at 5 o'clock she'd pick me up.
I remember enjoying junior school. I think it was called Mary Magdalene or something, and I remember it was run by nuns.
Like every other child, mischievous, wanted to dance, so my mother sent me to a dance school.
I remember getting quite a few slaps across the backs of my legs for being naughty. So I remember, yeah, the kids have got it easy now. They used to be able to smack the shit out of us when we were kids.
Right from day one till the day I left school was a very, very positive experience for me.
We were told when we were, I don't know, 7 or 8 to bring in something that really reminded us of our family and home. And I came in with a bit of kente cloth, which is the national cloth of Ghana, fashioned into a waistcoat for me. And I brought it in and I explained why it was important. And I did a little sort of traditional dance and all of the class loved it. And the teacher just was really surprised that not only at that age I was that knowledgeable about my heritage, but that I was accepting of it and also quite proud.
I went to a small private school in Essex, but I came back to East London and my friends were from East London. I used to hang out in East London.
I started school at 3 years old. Then my parents divorced when I was 8. And then I ended up going to a school actually far enough in Wood Green. And yeah, that was an experience.
The people in the class that were considered, I don't know what the PC word is these days, but or nerds or geeks or whatever like that, they were my friends. I could speak to them. We could talk about comics and all that kind of stuff and all that. But then the people that were the bad boys, they liked me too, because I had a certain thing about me that they liked too, so I could talk to them and they're like, yeah, I can test all these guys and keep my reputation, but I'm not sure if I test that guy and he clouts me back, my rep's kind of gonna... So I was always in the middle. I was never a bad kid, but I was no police ever came to my mum's door.
Because my father was so keen on education, and we used to say to us when we were sort of 3 or 4 years old, so what college in Oxford are you going to go to? And sort of just this idea of going to university, getting an education, was instilled in us for a very early age.
You know, my experience of growing up is this. I tried not to let my dreams be taken away from me. I wanted to be a writer, as well as being an astronaut, but I also, once I put my feet on the ground, I wanted to be a writer.
I was singing melody long before I was talking, long. They didn't understand anything I was saying in nursery school, but they understood that voice when I started to sing.
I felt unless I could articulate myself through words, then I was stuck. Because I was very conscious of the fact that people were quite keen to define me, to determine me, before I ever said a word.
Modelling just never entered my mind. It was just never something I ever thought about.
I was very much into my athletics by the age of 14. I was very much, this is what I want to do.
I went to my careers teacher and she said to me, okay, Mallory, what do you want to do? And I said, well, okay, I want to go to Goldsmiths and I want to do an English and drama degree and then I want to be a teacher. And she looked at me and she said, black people don't become teachers. And she said, why don't you become a secretary instead?
I remember saying that I wanted to be an astronaut, and a teacher said, well, Maggie, why don't you go into nursing? Now, that's quite scientific, and you like science.
I was working for Sainsbury's at the weekends, and my teacher said, oh, well, now, if you were to work really hard, you would perhaps be able to become a supervisor. Now, look, there's nothing wrong in being a supervisor in Sainsbury's. It's a great job. But as I said to David Sainsbury, I don't think he could really afford me, but, that's another matter.
When I was at art school and I started making work about, world issues, one of my tutors said, well, you're of African origin, aren't you? Why aren't you producing, ethnic art? And I didn't quite understand that. But I realized then that an African artist was not expected to be modern.
I'd finished my degree, I was 20 years old, and I was saying I wanted to go to the bar. I was told these two impediments may be insurmountable. And I thought, what impediments? Well, the fact that you are black and female. And I thought, those are the two things that I can't and don't want to change. And anyway, which profession will being black and female be an advantage?
I personally think one of the biggest problems is that at school, all the black history I learned was just bad. It didn't make you feel good about yourself.
What a lot of people in England don't know is that the actual development of England and development of most of these powerful Western nations was by the manpower of black slaves, but they've just been wiped out of the story. So these buildings just, they'll tell you about the architect and they'll tell you about the guy who had the idea to build the building, but they won't tell you how it was built. Even if you put that bit of information in the story, you've changed the story completely.
I remember when I was growing up, you know, you were given the impression that Africans were all being brought up in mud huts and it was all terribly primitive, which used to infuriate my father. It's one of the reasons he was like, I am taking you back to Nigeria so you understand where you are from and what it is really like.
My thing was, I just felt we were deceived a little bit, our generation. You know, everything came as a surprise. When you have to watch a program called Roots to understand what slavery was, I walked to school the next day so angry.
For most of the men that I grew up with, reading books and knowledge was like kryptonite. It wasn't something that you dealt with. It was for the nerds, etc., etc. I guess some of us were a little nerdy behind the scenes.
When I think about reading books that have really been very powerful, slave trade, the islands, the trail winds, all of that movement of the humankind as men of colour and women of colour was horrific, beyond horrors of horrors.
We bought books and then we empowered ourselves with knowledge. And it wasn't about being black power, just knowing your history. Ali was important. And I think the first autobiography I ever read was his. Muhammad Ali was my hero, simply because the first black man I remember hearing of was Cassius Clay. You know, as a little kid, I'm thinking, I like Cassius Clay. Why has he changed his name to Muhammad Ali? What's that? And then as time goes on, you hear him talking. You don't have to agree, but he empowered himself. And he said stuff and did stuff. And I just thought, wow, he really made a difference.
The need for cultural identity is crucial. The sense of not belonging. For my brother particularly, that was huge, the feeling of not belonging.
You have that argument with your parents where they scream at you and say you're not like your white friends. And on some level they're right, because you definitely don't look like your white friends. But on some level you are, because you've grown up with the same cultural references in the same schools, with the same accent.
It's about being a cultural orphan. That's how I term it, you know? And if you don't feel that belonging, at least you've got your family, right?
Okay, so that was I think that was about 9-10 minutes. That was a really interesting first bit of the video, and I think a lot of the main points that I sort of got from that was the sense of belonging and the nuances of having to sort of navigate both sides of your identity, of, you know, being maybe of African descent or Afro-Caribbean descent, but also being British, and finding ways of not negating both sides, because you want to, you know, you like how Reggie Yates said, you know, that you feel intuitive and you feel close to your heritage, and you're knowledgeable about that, hopefully, but you know, much like a lot of your counterparts who quote unquote are, you know, are from here, you share a lot of the same points or references. You've watched a lot of the same shows, especially when you're young. I think in this generation, that's even more of a really blatant thing. I think the inclusion of the emergence of globalization as well has helped with that, and how we're so in tune with each other. And I think when you're looking at our generation compared to maybe our parents' generation, that line of what it means to be Black British is a little bit more at the forefront. I think our parents won't see themselves as Black British, but we definitely will, because as you know, generations have changed, we've become a lot more ingrained with each other, especially if you're from London. That differentiation is not there. It's a very complex thing that you can't really separate in its entirety. So I think what I sort of want to talk about and sort of ask you guys is how do you sort of see the idea of what it means to be Black British? I mean, compared to what you thought it was when you were younger and you were in school and you were really exercising your social muscles with other children the same age as you, maybe kids that were a couple of years older, compared to how you sort of process what it means to be Black British now, while you're in the workforce and you're, you know, living life and you're hitting new milestones and entering a new phase in your life, you know, the dreaded sort of adulthood that we've all spent most of our lives trying to avoid, and all the responsibilities that come with that. Is the sense of belonging and the sense of being Black British, has that changed over time for you? If you're thinking about what you thought it meant then and what it meant, well, and what it means to you now. And I guess I'll throw it out to Nadine first, ladies first. I'll throw it out.
Well, I cannot wait to be an adult. You know, I was one of those people. I cannot wait to get to 18 and do my own thing. But no, that's a really interesting question, because I think if I think about my primary school age, where I went to a mixed sex school, mixed in terms of race as well. We had, you know, white children, Black children, Asian children. It really wasn't a thing as such for me personally, because there were Black people, there were white people. We were all very different. And because you're young, there wasn't really an issue, or I didn't really think of Black British. That wasn't a term known to me as a child then. And even when I think of, you know, in my secondary school years, I went to a predominantly Black school. There was 2 white people in my class, so white girls in my class. So I didn't really have that feeling of being othered, if that makes sense, because I was always surrounded by, you know, Black people, Asian people. So I didn't really have that Black British label. And now I think in terms of my working life, I guess that's when it kind of switched. But I guess it also depends what industries you work in as well, because I've worked in housing industry where there's lots of Black people. And then when I've moved into professional services, I've noticed there's not so many Black people. So I guess it varies depending on your personal circumstances, your personal experiences. And now that I am where I am today, it's very evident around, you know, being Black British. It is constantly there. It's something you can't hide behind. I mean, I do it in my day job, speaking about race all day, every day. So it's interesting that throughout my life it hasn't really been an issue, but now that I'm an adult, it is what I live and breathe. Yeah, it's interesting.
And what about you, Horatio? How would you?
So one of the things that really jumped out at me was the sense of pride in your heritage. And I remember when I was younger, I'm not sure if you had the same thing in the playground, but there was always 2 West African countries, and I'm not going to name which ones they were, but they would be there in the playground, and there would be people saying, "My country is the best country." We don't know why one country is better than another country, but either way, the conversation is there, and you'd have people speaking about the food, the language, the culture, and the expression of of how important things were to them, and the deep understanding that they were building of their heritage and everything that mattered to them. And that was, for me, the representation of what it meant to be a kind of young person of West African heritage. Those conversations, being able to have fun with people, that kind of insight. And when it was discussed in the video about the idea that people really understood their heritage, I took it for granted when I was younger that, similar to Nadine, I was in a situation where I was surrounded by many other people who just knew their heritage, and you had access to ideas, to thoughts, to people that were just so different. And I think what's been interesting is, as life has gone on, I've got older and I've come into more spaces where actually my difference becomes more evident. Actually, those underpinning things have then become so fascinating, because I understand how those different views give me a kind of different perception on things, help me to challenge a little bit more, help me to kind of explore with a idea or mindset that other people wouldn't have covered, and actually also gives me a sense of pride, because I fully appreciate that, having had many conversations with people that I've spoken to throughout my life as I've kind of grown up. Many people often say, I wish I could know a little bit more about my heritage. I wish I could know a little bit more about the people who raised me, who could say a little bit more about, the place that I'm from. And I think I take real pride in the fact that my parents and those around me have given so much of a understanding of what it means to be where I've been from, as well as the conversations in the playground and the other spaces, which have just kind of given me an energy and a happiness. How much have I described? Have I actually answered the question? I don't know. But the long and short is, I could say, from being a young person to now, I definitely maintain this idea of heritage being important. I can see how, in the conversation that's been had, it does ring true to me that it's something that's important. But I guess it's interesting because it does contrast with one of the other things that was mentioned, which was that even though in an informal context people were aware of their history, it's not necessarily what was being taught in the classroom. And potentially, moreover, this was the bit that was really scary for me. People were speaking about pathways. They hadn't seen a senior manager at X company that was black. They hadn't seen an astronaut. They hadn't seen someone else. And so there was this kind of suggestion that even though people might be celebrating culture, heritage, and difference in one context, in another context, that there's also a kind of small, we don't understand it. We're not even sure if we're going to kind of suggest that there is a pathway for you. And I'm really interested in hearing reflections from both of you. Do you think that that's something that resonated with your own experience? Were there people around you who limited what potentially you were going to kind of achieve, or what were you still ambitious? What was the experience that you had?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I feel like, I have a very strong family, and it was always, you can do what you want to do. So I've never had anyone kind of say, well, no, you can't do that. And even if they did, I say, well, yes, I will. So, I'm from that kind of background where, you do what you need to do, get what you need to get. So I personally can't say I had anyone kind of say to me directly, no, you can't do that. Now, I don't know through my life journey whether people have said no to me because of, the color of my skin. I don't know. I'm sure it could have happened. It may have happened, but I can't call it out and say it definitely has happened. So no, I mean, for me, it hasn't been an issue as such, because I am, kind of focused on what I need to do and will do what I need to do, regardless of what anyone needs to say.
I would say for me, it's actually funny. I always say that for a very long time, I was sort of living in a world of naivety, because I didn't ever think that there wasn't anything I couldn't do. And I don't know if that was a situation that was inbuilt in me or just my own ego, who knows. I probably have to psychoanalyze that. But I I didn't ever grow up thinking, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. I think I was actually quite lucky. I don't know if lucky is really the specific word to use, but I didn't grow up in a household where my Nigerian parents were badgering into me that I needed to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. I mean, I'm sure deep down they were like, you need to be those things, but it wasn't something that I was hearing on a daily basis. So as I grew up and I started getting to sort of understand that stereotype, I was like, does that actually happen? Do parents because my parents just never did that. They always instilled that I had to go to university, and I had to study something that was going to get me a good job. But it wasn't a situation where they were telling me that you have to do this or you have to do that. I think I remember always seeing like people in really high ranking like professional positions on TV and movies. I was a big like TV movie person when I was a kid. I loved watching movies and TVs and reading books. And so a lot of the things that I wanted to do with from watching other people do that on TV. But I don't think I ever realized that a lot of the people I was seeing weren't actually people that look like me. I think I would watch things like Ally McBeal and I would see Ally McBeal being a lawyer and I would never think, oh wait, there's like no black people in that show. It was something that I never thought to myself, oh, I can't do that because I can't see myself in it. But I think as I got older and I started to realize that, oh, actually, yeah, there isn't that many people on TV or in even the real world that represent people doing those sort of jobs. But I think for me, I guess to answer the question, I never had anyone tell me I couldn't do anything. Not even in school, I didn't have anyone say to me, you know, you can't become a lawyer or an engineer or anything. I think I found myself just gravitating to something that I felt that I had a natural ability in, which was critical thinking and evaluation and trying to study people. So I decided to study psychology and I just sort of went through that lane because it was something that I had a natural ability in and I really enjoyed. So that was sort of the lane I went to. But I think as I got further into it, I realized in mental health care, in psychology, in research, there is a massive hole when it comes to Black people, Black professionals, especially Black female professionals. It's hard. You're going to get a lot of Black psychology students, and you may even get a lot of Black psychology master students, but to get a lot of psychology students who are in the clinical doctorate is not as high. And there are reasons for that. And I think when you get into also looking at the practice of psychology, especially when you're looking into private practice, that also dwindles as well. So I think a lot like, it's very similar to how Nadine described it. I didn't see the vast differences because of my skin color when I was younger. And I think that was probably because we all probably grew up in London and we didn't notice that. It just wasn't a thing because we had such a dense concentration of people who were from similar backgrounds as us. And I think our parents purposely did that to, you know, in a lot of cases, picked areas that were, you know, had a high amount of people from our community. And I think as I got older and I went to university in West Midlands and I studied different things and I met different people, I started to see, yeah, okay, now I'm becoming, you know, one of the few Black people in the group. Or when I went to, you know, work for 4 months at a summer camp in America, I was the only Black person on the program staff. And I was like, oh, this is new. I've never been the only Black person anywhere. So it was weird for me. And I think as you get older, you start to see those pathways start to minimize for you. But I was never told specifically, explicitly to my face, you can't do this because you're Black. And I think that's just a sign of the times. I don't really think many people are really out here trying to say that to your face. That's a lawsuit pending. So I don't think that's what people are going to say to your face. But I do think, yes, you may have probably been rejected for a job because of that. You may have had to be put on, you've had to, you know, be judged on a higher bar because of that as well. So it is a very indirect thing. And I think that makes it the most frustrating sometimes because it's indirect, you don't really know how to tackle it. It's like tackling an invisible enemy. It's such a hard thing to bring attention to, because it is a lot of it can be, especially in professional services and just career wise, can be a lot of he say, she say. It can be a lot of hearsay, and it's hard to prove. And so that becomes difficult, it becomes frustrating, and it becomes mentally taxing. And I think I don't know if I feel like I'm rambling now, but I would just say that yes, it's an indirect thing. It's not something that it's not something I think anyone in our generation past 1980 is probably going to have experienced explicitly. And I think that also has a massive effect, you know, on why you see a lot of young children probably, you know, trying to shoot for the stars, and then as they get older, there is that effect of, oh, I was wrong, I didn't know that this was the situation. But I do think because of how much information we do have at our grasp now, a lot of young people are going in informed. And I think if you're going in informed, it makes a massive difference to how you mentally prepare yourself for the microaggressions you're going to face, and how you navigate yourself, how you prepare yourself to be in the best position as you can. Because I'm sure, you know, a 16-year-old in 1994 had a very different view of how to get to Oxford than a 16-year-old in 2000. So that it makes such a massive difference when you know and you're informed of the prejudice and you're aware that this is what you're going to face, and you have at least options of how to mitigate those things. And so that, I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned, is making use of all the help you can, not being ashamed to make use of or any of the help that you see. You know, don't let anyone tell you, oh, don't take handouts. No, take the handout, because sometimes you need it. So yeah, I think that's my main thought process with that.
Awesome. And just in the interest of time, we're going to go on to the next part of the episode. So loading, you'll see it on your screen at the moment, and enjoy.
Jamaica's a conservative country by and large, and my parents are very much part and parcel of that. But although that is where my heritage lies, I'm not a Jamaican.
There was a strange disconnect because of our parents telling us to integrate from our original culture. And some of us clung to our culture and went, okay, well, I'm not going to disconnect. I'm going to stay true to my culture because it's important. And some of us kept our culture, but also were interested in integrating and assimilating because that was the game in town, right?
And then obviously coming to this country and suddenly seeing a kind of diaspora of Black people in a kind of new way, not in a kind of ethnic way, but more of a kind of a national and racially mixed way. And that, I think as a young sort of African, was just sort of fascinating.
I and millions like me fit into a very unique little category where I was my own culture. Every aspect of my life, I wanted to demonstrate the duality of my heritage, of my identity.
We are, I think, the first generation in that line of sort of immigration that both accept where we're from, but also embrace where we are.
At times in those weird, angsty teenage years, you look at other girls. This girl's considered pretty, but no one ever says anything like that about you. Was it to do with colour? Was it to do with the fact that I wore glasses? What was it? I don't know. At those ages, what you look like is so important to you.
When you were first spotted, what was your reaction?
I thought she was talking to my girlfriends. They were blonde, long hair, blue eyes, you know. I didn't think she was talking to me. And she said, no, you. And she gave me her card, and I was like, okay. I have to ask my mom. And my mom said no.
When I started, sort of back late 80s, early 90s, the successful black models were sort of very exotic, very dark, very African looking.
And now, it's incredible what's happened in the last 20, 30 years. Incredible, the difference.
Halle Berry is considered the most beautiful. She's stunningly beautiful. But there's Angela Bassett, who is also stunningly beautiful. But Halle's lighter, thinner nose, smaller lips, closer to the white ideal of beauty.
One of the things that in later years I questioned was how I had, in my early career, I was the acceptable face of blackness, you know? Which was something I couldn't possibly have anticipated.
India, China, Thailand, everywhere you go, being seen as lighter skinned is being seen as superior. And that's because when white people went and colonized the world, they foisted on us this idea of white superiority. And we still, even though we think consciously, we're like, I don't believe that, we do still.
I am a part of the generation that wants to be Beyonce. Beautiful blonde hair / weave, fairer skin. I know that as much as I have been raised to appreciate who I am from the inside out, the heavy burden of this ideal image has often been far greater. It speaks louder. The anxiety comes from trying to be something that I know very well I'm not.
The song that I was always asked to sing as a little bit of an awkward teenager was The Greatest Love of All. They can say that you're ugly and that you've got great big thick lips, which is funny now because everybody's trying to buy great big thick lips. They can say all those things, but they can't take away my dignity. I was telling myself those words because what is special about me comes from within me.
Could you give us a little bit of it?
Yeah. I believe the children are future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. I decided long ago never to walk in anyone's shadow. If I fail, if I succeed, at least I'll live as I believe. No matter what they take from me, they can't take away my dignity, because the greatest love of all is happening to me. I found the greatest love of all inside of me.
Well, there you go. I appreciate that little that little song from Beverly there. I would say, I think for me, the idea, the biggest thing that I got from that, the idea of even within the community, the hierarchies that we've sort of implored because they've been forced upon us when it comes to the idea of who's worth more because of how they look, or how society views them from the outside in, and how we've sort of, I guess, taken that in and moved along with that. I guess my question would be, when watching that and looking and hearing about, you know, the differences and how things have changed and how black is being viewed from the outside, what would you say for you has been the biggest the biggest realization of, oh, this is how people saw me and this is how people see me now? Is that, has there been a situation where you're like, I didn't even think that, or something that, as kind of how we said before, what you've taken in and you've realized, oh, that's something I didn't realize, and maybe I've internalized a little bit. Has that been something that you've come across or registered for yourselves?
So I only jump in to say that I think that both of you might have some really powerful reflections in this space. I think the only small thing that I can contribute here is I know that even as a young child, my parents have always kind of tried to push me towards like ideas of image, which perhaps you could say were naturally acceptable to people. Short hair, very, very limited. I mean, it's only recently that this has started coming through, and now people are saying to me, Horatio, it's looking good. But we'll keep that to one side for a moment. But I think the long and short is everything that I've done has perhaps been acceptable and it hasn't necessarily therefore kind of stood out. If I was, for example, someone who had dreads, someone who like potentially tried to style my hair in a different way, would that have had an implication when I went to a debating society or when I went to another space and actually people were trying to kind of picture who was this person that was bringing something forward? Again, only really small. And I think I've benefited in some ways from having kind of really, really, again, like I say, acceptable styles that I've kind of put forward. But I'd be really interested in hearing any reflections that both of you have.
Clicking the wrong button. Acceptable styles. What do you mean, Horatio? Do you mean just one of the mill, acceptable for everyone? What?
So by acceptable, the idea that, so I don't want to put myself in trouble here, but for example, when I went to college, there was a dress code for how your hair should be. There was a maximum acceptable length for boys. There was a kind of dress sense of like, well, you weren't allowed earrings, you weren't allowed like certain specific things. There was a really, really strong code of you can and can't do. Now I know that the college set its parameters based on what I think their suggestion was that people were going to be using in the professional world. And so in that sense, there was a kind of suggestion of this is what we give to you because we expect that if you're going to become a banker or something else in that space, people are going to have similar standards to what we're operating here. And so in that context, everything that I did from an image standpoint, again, for whatever reason it was, what fell within what were how I would describe as acceptable boundaries. But it wasn't the case that I was actively trying to kind of fit into something. It was just generally that's how I was. But if it was the case that potentially I did fit a different profile, would that have kind of then been conducive to perhaps more conversation and more focus on my difference because of the fact that maybe some of the things that I was doing, earrings, dreads, or something else potentially were so different from perhaps some of the colleagues that I was with?
I mean, I can only speak from my own experience, and I guess because I've always been London based, I haven't really been many places. So I don't know what the experience is like, outside of London, because London's very multicultural. In terms of my own appearance, I think I was wild until up to 18. Green hair, nose ring, diamonds on teeth and all of that stuff. I've done it all. And I really didn't care. And I guess you don't care at that age anyway. But I mean, once I got into the world of work, yes, you do, kind of follow a certain look. But I have, been to work with very long braids. And at one point, I think maybe back in time, I might not have done that. But more recently, I think, you just be you at the end of the day. And I feel just embracing myself, I'm the best me. And that's when I do my best work. So I just do me and just leave it as that, really, to be honest, Horatio.
So I do have a really quick one and a follow up to that, because again, when I speak to many black women, they tell me about some of the kind of standards at work. And again, as opposed to me and Fur, it'd be interesting to hear from both of you in terms of, they say that often people see braids or straightening of hair as kind of the acceptable thing. And in certain instances, if you were to kind of go out with an afro or other bits, like maybe there are kind of like different cultural inferences that might pick up. Again, I'm interested in your thoughts. Do you feel that there are any professional contexts where you kind of see that, or is that perhaps maybe uh, a previous issue that we're not necessarily engaging with in modern 2021?
Yeah, I think it's a previous. Maybe back in the day, it was more of an issue, but I think now, well, especially since last year when the whole Black Lives Matter, you know, I've been on many Zoom calls. I've seen my fellow black women with afros rocking all kind of hairstyles, and that's what we're about. It's our hair. We can rock it how we want to rock it. So I think recent times it's not an issue. It's a non-issue anymore. We're just being who we are, and that's it.
Yeah, I think I do. What it is. It's interesting because I actually sort of disagree. I think I would definitely love to ascribe to that, but I think out of seeing the experiences of some friends that work in professional services, some of them black, some of them aren't even black, and also just prior experiences as well, I think there's definitely an improvement in the acceptance of having, I guess, diverse hair in the workplace, or diverse appearances in general in the workplace. And I definitely think there's been a massive strive, especially as Nadine said, in the past years with Black Lives Matter, of trying to be more, I guess, professionally accepting of the differences that come with having a diverse group of people as working within your firm or your company or whatever. But I think for me, in my personal experience, I've always been very safe with how my appearance comes across. I've never been someone to experiment. I didn't have green hair. I didn't have like the nose face. I guess deep down, I kind of always wanted to be able to experiment a little bit and do certain things with my hair. I mean, I know when I was a kid, I always wanted to like straighten my hair and see how it would look. But I had a mum who was very like, I don't have time for that. You're going to get braids. So I always had braids, and that was my thing. And I think as I've gotten older, that's just a comfort for me. So maybe sometimes you might see me with my hair out or something, but most of the time, everyone that knows me knows I'm always in some form of braid. And as I've gotten into like work in the workplace, I haven't really had too much of a problem with my hair being in the way it is, as I think that goes along with the lines of what Horatio was saying of having straightened hair or braids has always been sort of the acceptable black hair for black females in the workplace. So maybe that's why. But I think having friends who have dreadlocks and who are, I have a friend who is a marketing exec and she has dreadlocks, and when she first started her job, it was awkward. Like, you would get questions, and there were times when her manager would be like, I don't know. And so it does happen. And I don't know, I can't say for sure the extent and the frequency of how much it happens in this moment in time, but I do know it's definitely something that it's definitely I guess, back to what I was saying before, an invisible enemy that a lot of black females feel like they have to fight, whether it's from the microaggressions of questions of people trying to touch your hair, of there being a sort of a dress code or a way of wearing your hair, or even research that's come out saying women who dress a specific way or have a specific hairstyle are less likely to get certain promotions compared to other women. And so this is a thing that is still somewhat prominent. I don't think it should ever stop you from wearing your hair the way that you want to wear your hair. I always say that, you know, decisions are made in droves. If enough people are deciding to do what Nadine has said and wear their hair the way they want to wear their hair, I mean, they can't fire us, they can't fire all of us. So I think, you know, if you make that decision to be authentic to yourself, and enough people in droves make that decision, it will become the norm. I think the issue, and so this is why I do agree with Nadine, I think the issue is more a personal thing of it, because that history has been ingrained in us. There is a fear of, can I really go to work with my dreadlocks? Can I really go to work with an afro? Can I do this and not be judged? And then if I do it, am I gonna have to deal with people trying to touch my hair and ask me questions and go, oh my God, yesterday you had, you know, a Beyonce type like hairstyle, now you've got braids, what happened? Like all of these things that we have to deal with. So I think it is an internal struggle, because you do have to make a conscious decision to decide that this is what you want to do and be okay with the fallout of that, whether good or bad. And I think if enough people make that decision and go forth with that, then it becomes it becomes normal, and it becomes something that people are like, okay, you know. And it's just unfortunate that takes time, and that takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of conscious effort, and it is a cognitive thing. It's a cognitive process you do have to go through. And I think there is a lot of feelings of frustration of, why do I even have to go through that cognitive process when my white counterparts don't even have to think about that? But yeah, I think I agree that you should feel comfortable and confident in the decision of wearing your hair however you want to wear it, and know that it's okay regardless of what people say or do. But I also take into consideration that there is a lot of pressure indirectly and from within on ourselves of how we want to present ourselves to give us the best chance. And I think that's just a leftover of the idea of having to work twice as hard and having things that are out of our control that make it harder for us to work and be as successful, even if it's something as in the grand scheme of things, as minute and irrelevant as how we wear our hair. So.
Yeah. There's a I think it's some kind of new charter that organizations can sign up to in regards to what we've just discussed around hair. So I can't remember the name of the organization, but there is something out there that organizations can sign up to say that, you know, Black women can wear their hair however they want to wear their hair. So, which is good.
Hey everyone.
Hello.
Hey,
Just before we jump back in,
Hey.
yeah, Esther, I can see that you have your hand up. Feel free.
Okay, sure.
Hi,
Hey,
Esther.
no, it's been interesting. Hi, I've been on the call since the beginning, but it was just really, I was trying to listen to everyone. It's really interesting. And I was just going to say, so I think there's two things. I think first on the hair thing, I think like something I find draining is just how Black hair is just politicized. Like sometimes I just literally, you want to just do your hair without it being a thing. So for example, I remember when I started my new job and I just had a head wrap on because I literally couldn't be bothered to do my hair. And there's a new job in the pandemic. I haven't actually met anyone, but this Black woman actually messaged me and said, it's so great to have a new colleague. I think she's the only Black person. And she was just like, and like, power to you for wearing your head wrap. And I think at first I was thinking, bloody hell, like clearly nobody had, especially no Black people on the team. And I think for her, like you said, Nadine, I think it was just the fact of just seeing somebody else who also, like, do you know what I mean, just had a diverse hairstyle. Do you know what I mean? I didn't have my edges laid wherever, it was just my natural hair wrapped around a hair tie. But I think sometimes as well, you just want to have your hair wrapped without it being a thing or like some sort of like political statement you're making. I think a second thing though is that I think we also need to remember, even amongst, let's say for example, Black women in this case, there's still that privilege when it comes to your seniority in the company. I think when, for example, you're a young carer who, I think young carers are a group of people that often leave out of the conversation when it comes to race as well. Or you're someone that is responsible for providing for your whole family, or you come from like a very, low socioeconomic family. I've heard people be like, they're not willing to take the risk of potentially like doing a hairstyle that's not deemed, as Horatio said, proper, because then they don't want to think maybe I didn't get the job is because of my braids or because of the fact that I had, I don't know, like my natural hair out. So I think, like Nadine said, I think actually seeing people that just have a diverse range of hairstyles, and it's not a thing. And again, not criticizing women if they want to wear the weave, it doesn't make them any less black, as I've heard other people say, or if they wear braids or their natural hair. The point is, I want to get to a stage where, like, literally people just feel comfortable in whatever hairstyle that they have. And I just do think, I find it quite, it's so shocking when you think about it, that our hair growing out of our head is seen as unprofessional when everybody around us, like white people, grow their hair is literally their hair. And we saw it with the recent Pimlico Academy thing, right, where a bunch of kids literally have been threatened with exclusion because they basically protest against just being able to have their natural hair back. So I think there's my point on that. I think the first part in terms of being Black British, I think, like Horatio said, the two West African countries we know, that's Nigeria and Ghana. But I think as a Nigerian, yeah, no, we know it's Nigerians. We think we're the only country in the whole of Africa. But I think being a Nigerian, like, I knew I was Nigerian, like, my language and the food and all of that stuff. So there was that pride. I think when I started to question what Black Britishness was when I actually went to America, because I learned so much about the history of the country. And I remember thinking, oh, what about my history, like Black people in Britain? Because in school, I think the UK has done a good job at, like, starting this PR campaign of where it's like, we're not as bad as the Americans. They've never compared themselves to other countries that are relatively better than them. They've always compared themselves to America as the greater evil. So we saw that in the race reports where they constantly do that. And I think what's happened is that I then came back from America and started reading about being Black people in Britain. And I was absolutely shocked because, like, I only knew about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. I did not have a clue that there were Black people in the UK or even Black Tudors. So I think, like, in terms of that then started to make me question, and I started to realize that when we talk about Black Britishness, so I write and I work in the civil service, I felt like I started noticing as a Londoner that a lot of that narrative was centered around Black Londoners in terms of my experience. And that's even when working on diversity schemes, you could tell that there was no consideration for Black people who lived outside of London and also the major cities such as Birmingham, Manchester. And I often ask myself, I wonder what Black Britishness looks like for Black people, how they experience that, who live in small towns that we've never heard of. Like, I don't know, like, I don't even know their names, but, like, you know, Wolverhampton or somewhere in Wales where you live in a village of like 600 people and you're the only Black family. I wonder what Black Britishness looks like in that aspect. And I just think it's always important to remember that even with Black people, we're not a monolith, and to, like, always consider the diversity that comes in when we say Black Britishness, and just remember that we shouldn't center that around London, because we do see that in a lot of the art or the creative work that goes up, whether it's Netflix shows or whether it's writing or whether it's reports. So I think that's something where I'm at right now in my education stage, is trying to understand the diversity of Black Britishness and what that looks like to different Black people across the UK. So yeah, just some thoughts, but it's really great discussion, and great to hear everyone's thoughts.
Really great to hear from you, Esther. Thank you so much. And on that basis, I'm going to quickly flick us onto the final segment of the video so that we can watch it and then have final reflections from those on the call. So please do enjoy, and voila.
I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was. Not white, not black, not anything, not belonging anywhere. I was taken into the care system because my mother just couldn't cope. She couldn't cope with everything. And then I walked backwards all my life, trying to find myself. Oh.
Well, I myself had a breakdown when I was 23, struggling with identity and who I am.
I'm a human being, and I've never said I was perfect. I am a work in progress. It's good for people to see it's not always happy, happy, happy. You know, I don't ever want people to conceive me as that way. I am human. I break down. I cry. I have real blood. I am not always up. I'm sometimes down. I'm not depressive, but yeah, it's not every day is a fantastic day, but we have to make do. We have to be grateful for what we have.
Well, you leave drama school and you're in the world and you're a black actor. And you don't see many black actors doing well. And you're always going for the black role, and it's not the central role. And I struggled with that. And I think I started to drink a lot and self-medicate in other ways, and eventually lost control of that.
How bad did it get?
I was sectioned. It was one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. I was in the grip of something that was telling me to do things, hearing voices.
What voices were you hearing?
Well, he turned out to be Martin Luther King, which was extraordinary. Extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. I went with absolutely everything this voice told me to do, and I remember doing all kinds of crazy things. Singing for my lunch. I'd go into restaurants, eat the food, and then say, I've got no money, but I will sing for you. And they would laugh, and we'd sing, and then they'd say, go on your way. And I was very lucky that it was kind of entertaining or jokey or whatever, but I managed to kind of survive like that for about a week. And then it all started going a bit wrong, and I obviously started getting mentally tired and ended up getting sectioned.
Black culture in general is kind of quite informal, quite expressive as a culture, whether that's African or Caribbean or wherever else.
You know, you see a lot of them, hello, and then black man, yes, brother. You know what I mean? And it's like it's a different vibe.
So you can't be as open, informal, expressive as you'd like to be.
The one thing that a lot of people who are watching this in the most respectful way are not going to realize is that even with someone like myself, when you walk into a room, because of the color of your skin, you're already kind of judged in a certain kind of way. If I walk in like hastily, like, someone's gonna be like, what's happening here?
But you kind of feel like you always have to check that, because the moment you speak loud, you see people jumping or grabbing their purse, or someone says something to you and you answer them back, and it's like you're aggressive. Even though they said it to you, you answer back, you're aggressive. It's like, well, no, you came at me a certain way. I responded in the same manner. You just didn't expect that, and now you're shook, and you're calling me aggressive. And that's the kind of thing that gets us shot, isn't it? You move too quickly, bang, you're shot.
Every time a black boy aged under 18 is stabbed or murdered on the streets of London, they never talk about them as the 16-year-old GCSE student or the talented geography student who'd been murdered. You never hear that. All you hear is that they were an aspiring rapper. Well, actually, they're uploading music to YouTube, which a lot of people do. But when we talk about younger white males, you hear plans to go on to study mathematics at university or something. And it's how those two lives are then viewed and the assumptions that happen as a result.
I think it's easy to dismiss black kids in this country because it's only certain areas that are mixed. So if you're white and you've grown up in an area where you've only really been around white people, then it comes down to, okay, what's the media showing you? If the media showing you, gangs, hoodies, this, that, left, right, and centre, then that might not help your perception.
And that narrative just grows and grows and grows. And then you do get people, when you see groups of boys walking down the street with sportswear on, immediately they get the fear about it. That hasn't come from nowhere. It's a narrative that is slowly but surely drip-fed to the public. So then, instinctively, they then become scared of that person.
The people in this country, they've got to liberate their minds also. Not to see a black person as an object, but as a person. And until that happens, particularly those who wield power, it isn't easy for us to change it.
All violence is pointless, but there's a history of violence just in this country full stop. It's not a black thing. I know the truth. I grew up around rough white boys too. Tired of hearing that shit. Knife crime, knife crime. It's just violence, man. As a victim of knife crime, how did it feel? I don't know. It hurt. It hurt. It hurt physically, hurt my ego. At the time, I didn't really think, I don't know if I was gonna die. I did feel like when it was happening, like I was looking at it. I was looking at myself getting stabbed. I remember that. And then it's a tricky one because the same people that whoever stabbed me is people that was with them that took me to the hospital, tried to preserve your life. People are violent. It's not a black thing, it's not a white thing, it's a people thing. It's not as black and white as black and white.
Anyway, as a black person, you're always a slight space traveller. You're always a figure who's walking through territory that has potentially not been explored before. It's very difficult to navigate the game because the rules are unwritten. The fact that it is even a game of sorts is never made explicit to you. So what do you do?
That was something I did. I did a lot of self-deprecatory jokes aimed at myself, aimed at my colour, because I'd seen other black comedians do it. I'm not making excuses. I have half a brain. I could have made a decision not to. But, you know, I was 16 and in show business and going, hooray! And not really making many decisions that you could go, that's a good decision, my boy. I wasn't making many of those good decisions for a very long time. Still don't sometimes. But there's a time when you can own your identity and go, this is who I am, let's do this.
I was at college at 16, I had a girlfriend at the time, doing a fashion show, and she asked me to help her make the collection. I might make a collection, I can't do that. Maybe design a program, but that's about it. So now I'll show you. And she showed me, and I had a natural talent for it. And after the show, you know, people were interested to buy what I'd created. And, you know, I was like, you know, I'm like, really? And a friend of mine said, look, you know, you should go to Savile Row. It's not really interesting for me. So no, you should really go and have a look. There was a very famous tailor called Anson and Shepherd that was on the corner. And I had a little picture in my mind that, you know, like one day I'd have a store in that very location. Yeah, but, you know, I'm 18 years old. I'm looking at the store and I'm going, what a crazy notion.
When I was 17, I was in A-level theatre studies and we went to see Othello. It was David Hayward. And like, I'll never forget it. Seeing him on stage at the time was just like, it was like, wow. And I remember just watching him. And not just because of the performance, but I was like, I don't know how you did this, but I'm gonna do it too. I'm gonna do it.
When I was at college, that voice that we all have inside us, that some of us listen to and some of us choose to ignore, told me I should be doing something else. And I felt like there was a bigger plan for me. And I didn't 100% know what it was, but I really, for some reason, trusted that instinct. And I decided not to go to university. I know that other people may have looked at what I was doing as risky and frivolous. I spent 4 years where I had no money in my pocket, sometimes having to bunk the train just to go and rehearse and be a part of this girl group. I was willing to sacrifice going out. I didn't care about having the latest Levi 501s at the time because the dream that I had for myself was so important that I had to make it work. It was like there was just no other option.
My name is Chevelle Dynot, and I'm a ballet dancer with the English National Ballet. This picture was taken in my 2nd year. This picture is so special to me because this is what it's like being in the Royal Ballet School. I cannot say I felt like, oh, I'm a black guy in this. I didn't see that as a problem. I always saw myself as Chevelle, the ballet dancer. Nothing was gonna stop me. Ballet is all I've done from 7 to now 30.
It's never talent that holds somebody back. 99 times out of 100, it's people's vision of themselves and their idea of what is possible. Why shouldn't it be you?
Did an Oxford Union address, Oxford University. I was invited. And I remember standing there thinking, this is crazy. These are probably our future leaders all in here. And they're waiting to hear me speak. I didn't have anything written down, I just did it all off the top of my head. And I just thought, this is insane.
Not very long after I joined ITN, the editor who employed me called me up to his office and said, I've been thinking about your career. That was news to me because at that stage I didn't even know I had one. And he said, what I think you should do is anchor the news sometimes. And I thought, this is the finest job in the world, because I don't think I would have ever gone to him and made that suggestion. I never had that vision of what I would do. I never thought it would end up this way.
Well, that was I enjoyed that last bit. I think for me, I think what I guess where I would like to start, I guess, the closing thoughts. There was a when especially when it came to the media portrayal of Black people versus maybe any other group of people, especially maybe our white counterparts. The idea when it came to the idea of violence and the crossover between two cultures and how it's viewed in the media when it's involving Black people and when it's not. And I think one thing that did stick out to me in that part was when Dizzee Rascal said, it's just violence. It's not knife crime, and it's not, black on black crime. It's just crime. It's violence. And I guess my question, looking at that, is the glamorization of violence and pathology in the Black community when it comes to media versus how it's looked upon in TV shows that are based mainly around white characters. Like when you think about even when you look at EastEnders and you look at the storylines between Black families in EastEnders compared to white families in EastEnders, or if you look at things like Top Boy and compare that with Peaky Blinders, they're essentially doing the same things, but the way that they're looked upon are very differently. And I think so I guess I would like to ask is, do you ever feel like there is a glamorization of the struggle of being Black and the pathology of being Black that is consistently pushed, and that's a narrative that we see, like that, when we see the conversation of people being tired of seeing slavery movies and being tired of seeing shows like The Wire that are based around gangs and drug culture that are centered in places like Baltimore, where there's a high amount of drug trafficking that is done by Black communities. So I think my question is has that changed? Is the media more inclined to not glamorize and profit over the less than favorable sides and nuances and realities of being Black, especially in a city? Or do you think that's something that is that something that's getting better, or is it getting worse in your view? Just because I thought that was really interesting when he made that simple statement. And I was like, that's exactly what I think is a big issue within the media. I don't know who wants to go first, and that's a long-winded question.
So I'll jump in really quickly, only to say that when you say has the portrayal of media been quite expressive? Well, I'd say that obviously we can split media. There's traditional media, which has editors, people who are thinking about how it is that they want to curate a message and bring that to you, versus obviously the explosion of social media as well, where you are able as individuals to tell the story yourself and create an image of what it is that you want. And I think that obviously in a world before social media, there was a real kind of interest in what traditional media was saying, because this is what this is the story that you saw or received was the story that was told to you. And to the extent that we didn't necessarily always have a good number of different people who are thinking in wide varieties of ways about how that story could be told, whether or not it reflected the reality or not, it was going to reflect what those people wanted to kind of share on a consistent basis. And I think what really stands out to me as a word in all of this is this idea of vision. For many people, before they become that thing, they want to be able to at least see that they could go there. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to see another person definitively looking like me, as we've spoken about today. But it does mean that I can position myself and imagine me in a future situation where I can be that thing. I could be the person on stage. I could be the prime minister. I could be the person that I want to be. And I think that what's really powerful about when we think about this idea of narrative, media, traditional versus new, is increasingly through all of the ways in which the media is changing, the ability that we have to increasingly write the narrative ourselves and to share positive stories of what can be the case. When I see Esther, Precious, and Nadine, and I say, look, these are powerful people who are moving in places. The fact that we're able to record this, put this somewhere, and someone who might be younger than us, who is thinking about what they want to move forward, is able to see that there are strong, intelligent people, three of you probably more intelligent than me, who are moving into spaces and doing things. That's an exciting thing. And so all I say is I agree that vision is important. And I think it's important that we remember the power that we do have in whichever small way it might be to actually contribute to that vision, not only for ourselves, but for other people.
Just to add in, because I found that interesting. But do you think, I know there's the conversation about the emergence of new media when you're comparing it to old media, but I also feel like we could question, how different new media really is to old media. Yes, there's more voices, but there are still voices that count for more than others. There's still gatekeepers and editors that control what we see, even if theoretically everything is at our disposal. Theoretically, I could sit and watch all the videos about anything that's happening, but there is still elements of gatekeeping and editing that happen that prevent certain messages from getting through to others. And I think as much as new media is great, there is because there's such an expanse of it, and there's such a it's almost such a regurgitation. There is that high levels of echo chambers that we do live in. And I think going back to what Esther was saying, of when you're thinking about social media in London and social media in a small town in Swindon, the way it's used is very different, and the way it's gatekept and edited is very different. And I think that's why I guess that the idea of that vision is so important, because you could both be using Instagram and seeing completely different things on your explore page. And so the idea of the world and the perception of the world that you're given is so different, even though we theoretically we have the same access to the same material, and so that's, I just wanted to sort of put that out there, because I think sometimes we do fall into that cycle of saying, there's so much accessibility of new media, and a part of me disagrees with that, because I think the vast amount of the accessibility actually makes it inaccessible in a weird way. But that might just me being nitpicky, I don't know. But yes, Nadine, I would like to hear from you on your thoughts.
So my thoughts is no, I think I agree with most of what you said there, Precious. And I guess it's like Horatio said, it's around the vision, and it's around making sure that our Black role models, the people that are doing great, the importance of networks are being showcased. I think that's key to changing that whole narrative. And we've got the power. We can do this for ourselves. And like Sharon White said, why shouldn't it be you? So is all about ourselves, what you want for yourself in the future, and having a vision. I mean, for me personally, I think I've always had a vision, even as a younger person. I knew I'd be working in a corporate setting. I didn't know what I'd be doing or where it would be. I just know that I'd be in the office somewhere and I would be having a voice at the table, and presenting. I don't know to who, but and I've always had that vision since at school that that's where I'd end up. Now, whether that and that's where I have ended up. And thankfully, it's something that I love. I love the work that I do. It has real purpose. I have a seat at the table that many don't have a seat at, and I make sure that their voices are heard and channeled. And like Horatio said, we all have to do our bit. I know, yes, we've got to do our day jobs, but if you're there, do what you can to make a change. That's my message, and that's what I try to do. I found myself in this fantastic organization. I didn't come into this role, and I saw that there was a need, and I took it upon myself, like, okay, why is this not happening? Let me put myself in that position. And thankfully, I am in this position. I do have a seat at the table, and I make sure that I can drive change where I can. So again, I think that vision piece is just so very important, and having a fantastic network as well. I think if I had networked even earlier, I think the importance of a network and having a support system is integral to your development. Myself and Horatio, met networking, and that's why I'm here today. So that's the other thing I do advocate for, as well as getting degrees and masters, etc., etc. If you do not have a good network, it's not going to be great. So I would definitely advocate for making sure that you develop your network, and make sure it's broad and it's wide. And you know what? Most people are receptive. If you reach out to someone online to say, do you know what? I'm new to this industry. Could I get, half an hour of your time? People are very receptive to that. So I would say to those who are watching, who are starting out, even those who are already, on the career path, do reach out to individuals in your industry, and make those connections, because you never know where they would lead to. Sorry, I went off on a tangent.
No, no.
I wouldn't call it a tangent. And I would second what you're saying, not just in terms of like reaching out to people, but follow up.
Yes.
It is so important, not just to have the bravery in the first place. And I know so many people have the conversation around it's difficult. When you say network, it seems like a foreign word. No one told me about networking when I was at secondary school. It was just, but when we say network, we're essentially saying meet people.
Meet people.
Like,
that's
meet
it.
People. That's all we're saying. Meet people, find out people. And it's interesting because even in the episode, very early on, they were speaking about the adaptability that many people were able to show, where they found new people and said, look, in this instance, I'm going to show this face. In this instance, I'm going to show this face. I'm going to be able to understand who it is that I'm working with. I'm going to show some level of emotional intelligence. I'm going to meaningfully connect with you in order to try and get to somewhere. And that doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect. And that's, again, the second piece that I come to with Precious, which is I completely understand everything that you're saying about new media. And in no way can we see social media as a panacea that kind of solves everything. But I don't think anything is a panacea. And again, just bouncing off the point that Nadine made, we make the most of what we can with the tools that we have available to us. And so the first tool, if you will, is each other. The first tool, if you will, is being able to kind of share expertise like this. And I think the final thing I'll say is this. It was said to me once that the most powerful thing that people used to do in many African villages is tell stories. Stories were the way of being able to tell people, look, this is your advice that you can take forward. We are now the storytellers. We may or may not have a platform that is big or small. We may not or may not have like something compared to anyone else. But the small platform that we do have, the small opportunity that we can share, even this conversation today, it might only be one person that looks at it and thinks, actually, I'm going to follow up because Nadine and Horatio and Precious said follow up, or I'm going to actually make that opportunity to do something else. That's a transformative thing. And if we're doing that, we're playing a part in supporting other people and taking that step. I think there's not much more else we can say. And talk about tangents. This is my tangent over. I'm going to pause and hand back over to well, I was going to say Precious, but I know Esther's just come off mute as well. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's an interesting topic. I think going back to Precious's point about the media environment, I think the key thing is obviously like working in PR, like which is my career field, is that you realize. I think the question is who is it for? And when I say that, I mean who are you producing that art for? And I'm defining art in this case in terms of media, if we're talking specifically about shows, so we're speaking about Top Boy and stuff like that. And I think that's the more interesting part, and that's the key question: is who are these shows for, right? And what's the purpose of it? I think there's been a wide discussion about Black trauma and people profiting from not only white people but Black people too. And I think that what we need to, and by Black people I mean the directors of this. I think what my issue is that I don't feel like we should obviously fall into the path of like, you need to show good images of like, that whole like respectability thing. No, but my thing is the diversity of storytelling. So yes, the top one story should be told, absolutely. But I think it's about having the diversity of stories. I want to see a basic show about, I love a gal pal TV show like the old type Sex in the City. I want to see a show like that, a basic show about a group of Black friends living in London or living in somewhere in the United Kingdom outside of London. I want to see a show about, so people, young 20-something trying to navigate their way through a new job in an office, stuff like that is having that diversity in stories and in storytelling. It's incredibly important. I think what the issue here is that only one type of story is being told. And I think as someone who writes on the side of freelance as a food writer, I cannot tell you the amount of times, even though I write about food, that you get approached by editors to write about when something tragic happens to George Floyd. You're like, oh, can you write an article about this? And I'm like, well, actually, no, I'm a food writer. I write about food. So why is it that the only time you consider rich is when you want me to write about something that, to be honest, it sounds cynical, but it will get you the views and it will get you the engagement. That's when you contact Black people. And I think there's a big push now, white people and Black people saying, creative saying that, yes, we want to talk about this, but we can also be able to write that this stuff like about brunch on Sunday. We want to be approach to the things that we actually love, like gardening. And I think that's why Black ballads, and which is why, again, like Horatio said in terms of new media, is incredibly important. Specifically, when I focus my work on Africa, you realize that because if it wasn't for new media, there's so many stories, it gives so many people access. I think the issue here is obviously, like I said, is the structural aspect of a lot of the new media in terms of social media. So it's having social media platforms that cover likeness, having a lot of content, for example, the cost of data is so much. So having a form of that media that makes it accessible to different people or it can be used on different platforms. But it allows people to tell stories and share stories that necessarily won't be covered in big media, because you have to remember that A, big media, BBC, the big outlets, they have a budget. B, they also have an editorial agenda, an editorial focus, which is not an issue, just that's what it is. So they're not going to pick up a story they don't deem to be important, and a lot of them have political alliances. So new media gives people the opportunity, for people that tends to be marginalized, a platform to share their stories and share diverse stories across the platform. And obviously that comes with this issue. You have misinformation and stuff like that. But people are able to share their stories and raise awareness about so many things that we did not have to do about. And I think this is why Black Ballad is honestly one of my favorite publications at the moment, because they have kind of like, the editor's made a really strong decision not only to censor stories about Black Brits in London, but she's actually hired editors that cover different parts of the United Kingdom. And now I'm reading so many stories about Black women, mixed race women, and hearing their experiences of what it meant to be Black. And I reading stuff at 27, and I'm in shock. Like, I did not have a clue about this, but a platform like that, thanks to media, was able to build a platform and build a digital platform, which meant that they could tell stories that we just weren't seeing, and they were also paying them. They were paying writers, which is another thing that is another issue. So I think, like I said, the issue here is not that. Again, like Top Boy, is the issue that only stories that have been commissioned when it comes to Netflix tends to be the Top Boys, and I think it was a Blue Story. And I did see a thread, I think last year on Twitter, where a Black writer was saying that you'll be surprised how many Black scriptwriters are trying to pitch basic stories like Insecure, and just stories about Black joy, or just Black people, just different diverse stories, but they're shut down, or the producers are like, okay, could you add a bit of, like, maybe someone gets stabbed in the script or something like that. So I think it's that whole thing again about who is commissioning these stories, and why are they allowing producers to tell the stories they need. And I think that's why, again, new media is amazing for that, because Issa Rae, whether you like Insecure or not, she was able to start building that and producing her own online streams by funding her own series and recording and putting it online herself. So again, I think it's that whole thing of, let's tell diverse Black stories and give and have, so that people have that, we're able to see different elements to ourselves in terms of the Black publication. So I'm not talking about the knife crime and media and stuff like that. I think specifically something I think about from a media perspective, which is what I'm working, is kind of like holding these people to account, who constantly kind of like don't allow Black creators to tell these stories, or basically warp their stories so that they can basically get views at the detriment of our community, basically. So yeah, those are just my thoughts on, like, kind of like, diversity of Black stories in mainstream media.
Thank you, Esther. I guess with closing thoughts, just to go along with actually what Esther said is segued really well into what I was originally thinking. So the point I was really trying to make, and as Horatio knows, I'm a big fan of new media. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. So I'm definitely not going to be the person to tell you that new media is not helpful and is not game changing in a lot of ways. However, I am a very big component in the fact that human beings have a pattern in behavior. And unless things are identified at the time, the pattern continues. So with new media, a lot of it does fall into the same patterns and the same traps that traditional media have found themselves in when it comes to telling a certain type of story, only gatekeeping and only allowing certain types of story, whether it's, Netflix saying, oh, we just want things like Top Boy and Blue Story and etc. And even when you do look at new media and you look at, people who are creating certain things on YouTube or on TikTok or Instagram, there are certain things that the algorithm pushes forward instead of other things. So I think my main point when it comes to the idea of vision is that when you have your own vision, you tend to go out and look for that. Now, that could be the vision that you have of your life as it is, or it could be the vision of where you want your life to be, as what Nadine had. And you go forth and you use that as your motivation, and when you are manifesting that, that's what you see. So it's the same algorithm on any form of social media or new media platform, is that manifestation of what it is that you have a vision to see and what it is that you want to see, kind of along with the lines of what Esther said about who is it for. So when you are on Instagram or you're on Twitter or you're on any of these social media platforms or any media platforms and you're creating content, you're thinking to yourself, who is it for? Now, it could be for somebody that is like you or for someone else that is completely opposite to you, but that's what it is. And the algorithm works as the universal manifestation of that. So when you are looking at how to get your eyebrows looking a certain way, that's what you're going to see on your explore page. When you're looking for how the rates of knife crime in London has gone up and gone down, that's what you're going to get. the social media and just new media in general is really just a delivery service for what you already want to see. So my argument really is that you have to be aware, and you have to go outside of what it is that you think you want to see, and you have to access things that you wouldn't necessarily look for, because the reality of new media is it is so accessible that is inaccessible for a lot of people. There are things on new media that is inaccessible because we are blocked from it, whether it's the algorithm because it's following what we already told the algorithm we want to see, or whether it's just what the algorithm thinks that we should be seeing. So if it's a situation where we have certain Black-owned media companies that have TV shows that are really good, and or movies that are, showing Black people in a different way, if the algorithm doesn't see you as viable, you're not going to be seen, and you may only be seen by Black people. That doesn't make it a situation where it becomes accessible to other people. For it to be successful in any form or fashion, it has to be accessible to people who don't look like us. Now we have things like Issa Rae, where she had Insecure, and everybody loves Insecure. Well, at least most people I think loves Insecure, but we forget that Issa Rae had Black Awkward Girl on YouTube that only Black people were really watching. And then eventually HBO was like, okay, cool, let's make traditional media in the form of a new media guise, took it on and spread it out. And the idea of Twitter and Black Twitter pushing that forward, but the reality is it was on an accessible platform. If it was just on BET, we wouldn't be talking about Issa Rae and Insecure in the same way that we are now. It was on HBO Max, which is owned by millions of people globally. There is a difference. So I think we have to remember that, yes, new media is very useful in telling stories that we don't hear, and giving the visions to people who want to see themselves in a power position, or to be a doctor or a lawyer. That little child who sees herself in Miranda Bailey on Grey's Anatomy, or that little or the boy who sees himself as a powerful doctor or lawyer, an engineer that we've seen in all these different TV shows. That's fantastic. But when we're looking at how new media really works, it does really work in a lot of the same ways that traditional media works. But there are ways to combat that, because the new media is so inbuilt in us as people, and how we use it and how we weaponize it, in the lack of a better term. So I think my real sort of closing comments is, I agree about the vision. We should have a vision, and that should be your driving force. And you should know that even if you don't see it, it doesn't mean it can't be there. That's what an imagination is for. But when it comes to new media, that vision sometimes is upheaved, and it is displaced, and it's moved aside, because even with the new media, traditional media is still control of it. We do have the gatekeepers on the ground, who try to push forward and try to give a different perception of what the reality really is, and that's how things like the Black Lives Matter movement really took hold during the pandemic. But we also have to consider the fact that what we see isn't always the reality of what we see, and we should be very conscious of allowing ourselves to access things that we wouldn't have accessed before, which is really a lot like the idea of having a network. Allow yourself to access a diverse network, just how you would access a network of people from different backgrounds to help you access a diverse amount of media to really give you the scope of what is really happening around you. And I think trying to turn that back to the conversation of being Black British, that being Black British, being Black anything is so multifaceted. And it isn't just the high, the people working in corporate areas or people working in low socioeconomic areas. It's everything from that to that and in between. and we need to allow ourselves to be accessible to appreciating and understanding all facets of what it means to be Black. And I think that's the best way that we get the real inclusion, that's the best way we get the real equality, and that's the best way that we get the most truthful, authentic and valid idea of what it really means to be Black, because it means so much. It means so many different things for different people. And I know that my experience is different to Nadine's, and Nadine's experience is different to Horatio's and Esther's. And we see things very differently, but we do have a common experience of what it is, and that is being Black. And there are overlaps, but we shouldn't be too focused on overlaps. We should really be focused on the outliers and the differences that we don't always pay attention to. So that would be my closing thoughts. I guess, and the easiest way I can say is be open-minded, think outside of your sphere and your life and your identity, and think about others, because the worst thing we can do as people who've been othered is to other others. So I would say I don't know if anyone has any closing thoughts. I would like to hear some closing thoughts from everybody, because I know that I probably have rambled for ages. So
I think we've already had the closing thoughts. So on that basis, very happy to say a really big thank you to Precious, to Nadine, to Esther, to everyone who is viewing via YouTube on the stream. Really appreciate you having we appreciate you being with us in this conversation. It has been a deep conversation where we've covered everything from heritage, judgment, image, expression, as well as media. And the final things that we've suggested around this idea of using networks, using the ability to reach out to people, using our voices to really tell the story and to help other people through, is hopefully a final thing that we can all take away. So on that basis, to everyone, have a lovely evening, or whatever time of the day it is that you're watching this. Thank you again. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.